So the next thing the water does is go past the protein skimmer. Now this is a absolutely and totally backwards design. So back in the old days, before they really understood how the systems work, they would do things like put a protein skimmer after the biological filter. So just to be clear, what a protein skimmer does is skim out proteins, amino acids, and most higher level organics. But at the moment, the protein skim is after the biological media, which means the biological media is going to break down most of the waste, and then by the time it gets to the skimmer, it can't skim. So it can only remove the higher level organics, and most of the higher level organics would hardly even make it past here. So removing the bioballs and then just putting some marine pure under the water will give the skimmer much better access to high level organics, and then the skimmer can actually work. Now, the other thing about the skimmer is it needs to be cleaned a couple of times a week. So right now it actually looks pretty good. How often do you clean the skimmer?
Clean today.
That's impressive, but how often do you?
All the time, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. So on the inside of this neck, it's going to build up fatty acids, and that's going to break any nutrients back down and go back in. So when you're cleaning the skimmer, all you really need to do is remove this cap. And then if you just got yourself a little bit of a bottle brush and wipe out the inside, and then it will keep skimming. Then when you eventually got too much crap in the skimmer, you can just take the whole cap off and
we got a sink and everything in
and get rid of it. So you can do a quick way. You can do the Bob's Your Uncle way of cleaning the skimmer, which is just clean the inside. And then when you start getting a bit of gunk out, because once the gunk's out, you don't really have to worry about it. So you only care about what's on the inside. So as long as you're giving the inside a clean a couple of times a week, then as it builds up, you can just take that cap off and give it a clean. Now, the other thing is that inside this skimmer, or running this skimmer, is going to be a pump, most likely with some sort of needle wheel impeller in it. So at least once a year, it's really good to give that pump out and give it a good clean. And even just soaking it a bit of citric acid or something overnight is quite a good idea. So making sure that the pump is in very good working order, and being aware that all pumps have got impellers in them. So about once a year, just giving the impeller a bit of a clean is going to be a very good idea. Okay, so you've obviously got a heater going here, which is obviously just down in the sump there somewhere. And so the heater, at the moment, it's saying 26 degrees. So you always want to make sure that there's no overlap with the heater and the chiller. So if we're going to go putting corals in the tank, depending on what temperature this house gets to, we may want to consider putting a chiller in there. Because the other thing is that in a beautiful big house like this, when you're home, often the temperature's not really a big problem, because you're probably going to have it air-conned and you're probably going to make sure it's comfortable for you. So when this tank would be a problem is when you go away on holidays and nobody's in the house, and then you come back and your tank's stuffed, because that's when the heat is likely to be a problem. So monitoring your temperature in summer, and then we've got some space here for a chiller if we need to. But I would really recommend, if you're going to have a chiller in here, I would consider venting the doors or doing some sort of like active vent. So maybe you're pulling air. We really want to actually pull air out of this area, because what we don't want to be doing is having a chiller there that's releasing lots of hot air in the same capacity of the water that we're actually trying to chill. So we really want to flush this air. So whether we could even barricade that off a bit and put some vents and whatever you can do to try to make sure that the chiller isn't necessarily in the same cavity of the water, because we don't want all the heat getting released from the chiller, heating the water and make the chiller have to chill. So we want to ventilate the area as much as possible. And we also want to be watching our heater, because we don't want our heater turning on when the chiller's on. So we've got to make sure there's a part in what they're set for. So maybe the chiller turns on at 26 and maybe the heater turns on under 24, or however that works out, to make sure that they're not on at the same time. Because as far as a reef tank goes, you really don't want it running above 28 degrees. That's about the highest temperature you really want to run it. So once again, we get some very good lighting. Make sure the area is very well ventilated, and then really start watching the temperature. Here is, we have an RO unit, which is at the moment manually getting turned on to fill the water in the sump. That's a very effective but easy thing to forget. And one day when you forget it and you go out and you leave it filling, it's never as fun as you think. In a perfect world, having this set up as an RO reservoir is better, because the other thing is you can arrange an auto top up in here. So then that automatically tops itself up. But you've got to remember that one day that auto top up will fail. So therefore, if you're running through the RO into here, the one day when it fails, it'll eventually freshwater flush your tank. So at least if you had this one as RO, one day when the RO fails, it's only going to pump that much water into the tank, which isn't really going to be the end of the world. So running from the mains into a top-up is risky if you're going to run an auto top-up. Now this little tank here, which has currently got a crack in it, which they could potentially patch. But this is a really handy thing to have, because this could actually be like a multi-purpose unit. You could potentially use it as a quarantine tank. You could potentially use it for mixing up salt water, and you could also potentially use it as a saltwater top-up. Now, because there is an amount of room in here, you could put a tub in, like a laundry tub sort of thing, and use that for your auto top-up, and then use that to hold your water to top it up. Because a tank like this is going to have quite a lot of evaporation, and if you can get yourself out of the loop so you're not manually having to top it up all the time, then that's definitely going to be a big advantage. So a little bit of extra planning, and that's going to be very beneficial. Now, as far as water flow is concerned, this tank has a fairly minimal amount of water flow. As far as the fish are concerned, it's totally fine. And if you went for just like very simple low flow corals, it would be fine. But if you wanted a really rich, diverse range of corals, I would definitely want more water flow. So that would be a very easy thing to solve. You would just get like a nice big power head there and maybe one on that side. In a perfect world, I'd probably put one on this side and then one on that side, get ourselves a bit of spiraling motion going on. But I would definitely want more water flow. Now, the other thing is that in our reef tank, you almost never see bubbles. So bubbles that do two things. One thing is they flick salt everywhere, which is a pain in the ass. And also, if you did have enough water flow in this tank, the bubbles would never make it to the surface. Because if you looked at any of my display tanks at the shop, for example, if a bubble came out, it would end up over there somewhere by the time it actually hit the surface. Because if you think about a reef, and when waves come across a reef, you look at the velocity of that water, it's actually quite intense. So if we wanted corals in here, the airstone is not really going to be practical. The airstone may help with what's called micro bubble scrubbing. So what some people will do is just turn it on every now and then, and that will turn the tank full of micro bubbles. And if you just do that every now and then for a short period of time, what that does is the micro bubbles find its way through the reef, and then the micro bubbles are going to bond with most nutrients and then cause them to raise. So it's a good way of sort of polishing your tank a little bit. But airstone is not really a worker. A couple of power heads would be very, very simple to install in here. And then that increased water flow. Normally you're looking for around sort of 14 to 20 times an hour for your water flow for a standard coral tank.